This account was written by Raphael, one of the creators of this channel, who experienced numerous supernatural situations throughout his life, especially in childhood, when he still didn't understand his mediumship. The goal here is for you to listen and share in the comments situations you have also lived through, so we can help each other. And attention, if you are not strong enough to face reality, do not proceed.
I was 10 years old when I learned that fear is not just a feeling, it is a presence, something that breathes beside you, that observes your every move, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I grew up in an ordinary apartment, one of those concrete blocks that all look the same. First floor, narrow hallway, walls thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing. Nothing special, nothing that stood out. But there was something wrong with that place, or with me. Since I was little, I saw things, shadows that shouldn't be there, whispers when everyone was asleep, objects that moved without explanation. My mother said it was imagination, that kids are like that. My younger brother never noticed anything, but I knew. I always knew. That afternoon started like any other. Grey sky, heavy air, the kind of day that seems to carry something invisible on its back. My mother had been invited by a friend to visit an evangelical church. She insisted I go, but something inside me screamed to stay. I should have listened. When the door closed and the sound of her footsteps faded down the hallway, the apartment changed. The silence became dense, almost solid. I tried to distract myself by turning on the TV. Some random afternoon program. Cartoons, maybe. I don't really remember. The sound filled the silence, but not enough. I sat on the couch for a few minutes, but I couldn't focus. My eyes kept drifting to the hallway, that long, narrow corridor that led to the bedrooms, always in semi-darkness, even during the day. I got up and went to the kitchen to get some water. The apartment was tidy, clean, everything in its place. The sink empty, the floor swept, the chairs tucked under the table. Normal, absolutely normal. But the feeling wasn't. It was as if the air was heavier, as if each room kept a secret I wasn't supposed to discover. I went back to the living room and stood by the couch, staring at the TV screen without really watching. I needed to take a shower. My mother, always very strict, said not to leave it for the last minute, but something kept me rooted there, reluctant to step away from the TV's artificial light. The hallway was watching me, I could feel it. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was still early, but something held me there, planted on the living room floor, reluctant to walk away from that artificial light from the TV. The hallway watched me. I could feel it. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was still early. My mother would take at least 2 more hours. Enough time to shower, grab a snack and wait. Simple as that. But my feet wouldn't move. I stood there facing the entrance to the hallway. The bedroom doors were open. Mine, my mother's, the office. All open, showing nothing but darkness inside. I took a deep breath. It was just a shower. That's all. I took one step toward the hallway, then another. The living room light didn't reach very far. Each step took me deeper into that cold penumbra, and that's when I felt it for the first time, that absolute certainty that I wasn't alone. I stopped in the middle of the living room between the couch and the hallway entrance. My heart was beating faster, but I tried to convince myself it was nonsense. Imagination. The same things I always saw, always heard. Nothing new, nothing real. I stood there motionless, staring into the hallway. The TV flickered behind me, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I needed to get my pajamas. They were hanging behind my bedroom door, on the usual hook. I took a deep breath again and took another step. That's when I saw it. A figure. Black. Dense. It quickly passed from my mother's bedroom door to my bedroom door. Too fast to be an ordinary shadow. Too fast to be my imagination. It was when I saw it again. A figure. Black. Dense. It crossed quickly from my mother's bedroom to mine. My whole body froze. I stood there, motionless, eyes fixed on the empty hallway. Nothing moved now. The doors remained open, quiet. The silence was absolute, broken only by the muffled sound of the TV behind me. No, it was nothing, just a shadow. Light from the window, maybe, or the TV's reflection. I began to convince myself of that. It had to be that. I had seen things since I was little, suffered a lot, and for some time I tried to convince myself it was tricks of the mind. I was almost believing it when it happened again. The figure passed again, this time from my room to my mother's room, the same dark shape, the same speed. But this time, something fell to the floor in the hallway. My pajamas. They were there, thrown in the middle of the hallway between the two doors. The blue pants and shirt I wore every night, lying on the floor as if someone had yanked them off the hook and tossed them there. My breath faltered. The pajamas hung behind my bedroom door, always. The hook was sturdy, the door was open. There was no wind, nothing that could have taken it from there and thrown it in the middle of the hallway. Nothing natural, at least. I was paralyzed, staring at those clothes on the floor. It was like bait, a trap. As if something were inviting me to go there, to be vulnerable between those two dark doorways. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the pajamas on the floor. Minutes, maybe more. Time seemed to stop, as if the entire apartment were holding its breath with me. My eyes couldn't look away from those blue clothes lying in the hallway. It was so simple, so harmless, just pajamas. But every fiber of my being screamed not to get closer. The silence was oppressive. The TV was still on behind me, but the sound seemed distant, muffled as if coming from another world. The apartment was cold, a cold that wasn't normal, but something deeper. I looked at the open doors. The darkness inside the rooms seemed denser now, more alive, as if it were watching, waiting for my next move. I needed those pajamas. I needed to shower. I couldn't stay there forever, frozen by fear of something that might not even exist. Maybe. I took a step, then another. My bare feet touched the icy floor, each step echoing in the silence. The distance to the hallway seemed to have increased. Each meter was an eternity. When I finally reached the entrance to the corridor, I stopped again. The pajamas were only a few steps away, but those few steps felt like a chasm. The bedroom doors were open on each side. Darkness to the left, darkness to the right. And me in the middle, exposed, vulnerable. That's when I felt the gaze. I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything, but I felt it. That unmistakable sensation of being watched, of eyes fixed on you, studying your every movement, every breath. My whole body shivered. I looked into my mother's room. The darkness was complete, but there was something there. In the back, a shape darker than the rest, motionless, standing, watching. My heart raced. It couldn't be. It was just darkness, just shadows, just my mind playing tricks. But the shape didn't move. And the more I looked, the more certain I became that there was someone there, someone or something, standing at the back of the room, silently staring at me. I couldn't take it anymore. I quickly moved forward, grabbed the pajamas off the floor and ran to the bathroom. My hands were shaking so much I could barely close the door. I locked it from the inside and leaned against it, gasping. The bathroom wasn't small, but it turned claustrophobic. The fluorescent light buzzed above my head, but at least it was lit. At least there was a locked door between me and that thing out there. I turned on the shower. Hot water started to fall, filling the bathroom with steam. I undressed and stepped under the water, trying to calm down. But I couldn't. I stayed there for a long time, much longer than usual. Hot water ran down my face, mixing with tears that began to fall without me noticing. Why was this happening to me? Why did I see these things? Why couldn't I be normal like my brother, like the other kids? I cried there, under the shower, feeling the weight of something I couldn't understand. The fear wasn't just of what was out there, it was of myself, of being different, of being alone in this. Time passed, 10 minutes, 20, 30. I didn't want to leave, I didn't want to open that door and face the hallway again. But then, I heard the thunder. A distant rumble, but threatening. The storm was approaching, and I knew what that meant. When it rained hard, the power went out, it always did, and staying in the bathroom in the dark would be worse, much worse. I turned off the shower with trembling hands. I dried myself quickly and put on the pajamas. I stood there in front of the locked door, taking deep breaths, trying to gather courage. Another thunderclap, closer this time. I put my hand on the lock, turned it slowly. The click echoed in the silence. I took one last deep breath and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The doors were still open. Everything seemed normal. But the feeling persisted. That weight in the air. That certainty that something was there, invisible, waiting. I left the bathroom and returned to the living room, keeping my eyes fixed on the hallway. I didn't sit down. The doors remained open. Everything looked normal. But the feeling remained. That weight in the air. That certainty that something was there, invisible, waiting. I left the bathroom and returned to the living room, keeping my eyes fixed on the hallway. I didn't sit. I stood facing the TV, but constantly looking back. I needed to keep watch. I couldn't be caught off guard. The wind outside began to pick up. The windows vibrated slightly. The storm was coming fast, and then it happened. A strong gust of wind came through the window cracks, and the doors started to close. One by one. First my bedroom door. Bang. Then my mother's room. Bang. The office. Bang. The bathroom. Bang. Each door closing in sequence, as if something were running down the hallway, running toward me. And then the lights began to flicker. The hallway light went out first, then the kitchen, then the one in my room visible through the gap under the door. One by one the lights went out, advancing toward me like a wave of darkness, until the living room light flickered one last time, and everything became completely dark. The darkness was absolute, dense, suffocating. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was as if the darkness had weight, pressing against me, enveloping every inch of my body. I froze for a second that felt like an eternity. My heart pounded so hard, I could hear it echoing in my ears. My breathing came in short, desperate bursts, then panic took over. I ran. I ran blindly toward the front door, stumbling over the couch, slamming my knee into the coffee table. The pain was sharp, but the fear was greater. My hands searched the door desperately, looking for the key. It always stayed there, in the lock, always, but it wasn't. I ran my hands over the wood of the door, the metal of the lock, the wall around it. Nothing. The key had disappeared. Thunder exploded outside, so loud I felt the walls vibrate. The rain began to pour, hammering against the windows like 1,000 fingers knocking, wanting to come in. I was trapped. My hands kept searching in the dark, sliding along the wall, the floor. Where was the key? Where? That's when I heard it. A sound coming from the hallway. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the rain, it was something moving, something dragging, slow, deliberate. My whole body froze. I stopped breathing. The sound continued. Closer. Coming from the back of the hallway, advancing toward me through the darkness. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't be exposed in the living room, in the middle of nowhere, waiting for that thing to reach me. I turned and ran again, this time toward my room. My hands stretched out in front of me, trying not to hit anything. I passed through the hallway blindly, feeling the icy air against my damp skin. The sound stopped when I went by, as if it were watching me run. I entered my room and slammed the door behind me. There was no lock. There was never a lock on the bedroom doors. I pressed my body against it, gripping the handle tightly. The darkness here was even worse. There was no window, no source of light. It was like being inside a tomb. My bed was somewhere in front of me. I let go of the handle for a second and threw myself toward where I knew it was. My hands found the mattress, the sheets. I tried to pull the blanket over me, but my hands were shaking so much I couldn't hold it properly. My fingers slipped on the fabric. Nerves had taken over every muscle in my body. I gave up on the blanket and wrapped myself in the damp towel that was on the bed. The towel my brother had used before leaving. It still smelled of soap. I curled up in a fetal position, clinging the towel to my body. I closed my eyes, even though it made no difference in the dark. And I waited. The thunder continued outside. The rain hammered on without stopping, but inside the apartment, the silence was disturbing. I could hear my own breathing, fast, shallow, desperate. And then I heard another breath. It wasn't mine. It was slower, deeper. It came from somewhere inside the room. My entire body tightened. I squeezed my eyes tighter, as if that could protect me, as if not seeing meant not being there. The breathing continued, steady, close. Something was in the room with me. I could feel its presence. I could feel the weight of its gaze on me, even in total darkness. It was there, watching, waiting. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I stayed completely still, praying for it to go away, praying for my mother to come back, praying to wake up and find out it was just a nightmare. But it wasn't. Time dragged on. Seconds felt like hours. Hours felt like days. I was trapped in that moment, in that darkness, with that thing watching me. Tears ran down my face, soaking the towel. My body trembled uncontrollably. I wanted to scream, but my voice had disappeared. The breathing continued. Each exhale felt closer than the last. And then, in the middle of that silent hell, I heard another sound. Someone knocking on the door. 3 knocks, firm, coming from the front door. My heart almost stopped. No. It couldn't be. It was a trap. It had to be. Something else trying to make me come out, to expose myself. The knocks came again, more insistent. And then I heard a voice, a female voice, muffled by the door but real, human. "Is anyone there? I need to borrow a candle." It was the neighbor, the lady from the apartment across the hall. The breathing inside the room stopped. The weight in the air eased slightly. A female voice, muffled by the door, but real, human. "Is anyone there? I need to borrow a candle." It was the neighbor, the lady from the apartment across the hall. The breathing inside the room stopped. The weight in the air eased slightly. I jumped up from the bed, still wrapped in the towel, and ran to the bedroom door. I opened it and crossed the hallway in the dark, stumbling, bumping into furniture, but not caring. I reached the living room door and shouted, "I'm here, wait, please, wait." My hands went back to frantically searching for the key, and this time, miraculously, my fingers touched cold metal. It was there, on the floor, as if it had been placed there on purpose. I grabbed the key with trembling hands, fit it into the lock and turned. The door opened and the hallway light from the building flooded the apartment like a blessing. The neighbor was there, holding a flashlight, a worried expression on her face. "Are you okay, son? I heard a noise." I couldn't answer. I just nodded, tears still streaming. She came in, illuminating the room with the flashlight. Everything seemed normal now, just an apartment in the dark during a power outage. But I knew the truth. We found candles in the kitchen. She lit a few and placed them around the living room. The faint flickering light of the flames was infinitely better than the darkness. "Do you want to stay in my apartment until your mother gets back?" she asked, seeing my state. I nodded immediately. I wasn't going to spend another second alone there. I sat on the neighbor's couch, wrapped in a blanket she offered me. The damp towel was still with me, clenched between my fingers as if it were an anchor to reality. Her apartment was just like ours. Same layout, same walls, same furniture arrangement. But the feeling was completely different. It was warm there, welcoming, safe. She brought me a glass of water and sat beside me, not asking many questions. She just stayed there in silence, respecting my state. I looked out the window. The storm continued outside, but it no longer seemed so threatening. It was just rain, just wind, just nature running its course. But something inside me had changed. I began to understand. Sitting there on that unfamiliar couch, wrapped in a blanket that wasn't mine, the storm wasn't the enemy. The dark wasn't the enemy. They were just tools. Whatever was in the apartment, that presence I had felt since childhood, had used the storm. It had used the dark. It had used my fear. The wind that slammed the doors was real. The power outage was real. But the timing, the sequence, the way everything happened, it wasn't a coincidence, it was orchestrated. I remembered all the other times. The figures I saw when I was alone, the whispers when everyone slept, the objects that moved. Always when I was vulnerable, always when I was afraid. Fear was the fuel, and I had been feeding that thing for years. The key that disappeared from the door, the pajamas thrown in the hallway, the breathing inside the room, all calculated to keep me in a state of absolute terror. But why? What did it want? There was no answer, and maybe there never would be. I looked at the neighbor's apartment, lit by candles and flashlights. So similar to mine, but so different. Did she feel things too? Did other people in the building live what I lived? Or was it just me? The question echoed in my mind without an answer. I heard footsteps in the building's hallway, voices. The door opened and my mother came in, soaked from the rain, with my brother by her side. The neighbor called me, saying you were here. She looked at me with that usual reproachful look, as if I had done something wrong by staying home and feeling afraid. "Let's go home," she said curtly. I obeyed, even though I was stunned with fear and wanting to never set foot in that apartment again. She exchanged a look with the neighbor, who simply nodded in understanding and thanked her. But eventually, we had to go back. The power had returned. The apartment was lit again. Everything seemed normal when we entered. My mother checked every room, turned on all the lights, opened all the doors. There was nothing. No sign of invasion, no sign of anything. I remember she looked at me and said, "You always give me trouble with these stories of yours. Today I don't even want to hear what you saw, because then I'm the one who has to keep thinking about it." It was one of the hardest parts of dealing with the supernatural, because I was always alone in these situations and still got scolded for the terror I felt. That night, I slept with difficulty, even with my parents home and my younger brother in the same room as me. I watched the door until I fell asleep, but nothing appeared. In the days that followed, I tried to tell what had happened, to my mother, to my friends, to anyone who would listen, but the words never came out right. It sounded like madness, like childish exaggeration. And maybe it was easier for everyone to believe that. Over time, I learned to live with it. Things kept happening, but few marked me the same way. It was as if that night had been a test or a warning. I learned that the supernatural doesn't need much to manifest. It uses what's already there: a storm, a power outage, a moment of solitude and fear. Always fear. Years later, when I moved out of that apartment, I felt a relief I didn't know was possible, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But sometimes, on stormy nights, when the lights flicker and the wind howls outside, I catch myself looking into dark hallways, and I wonder if that thing is still there, waiting, watching, using the natural to command through the supernatural, and feeding on the fear of those who dare to stay alone in the dark. That night marked me in a way no other experience ever did. It wasn't the figures, it wasn't the darkness, it wasn't even that breathing inside the room. It was the loneliness, the feeling of being completely alone, trapped with something I couldn't understand, that I couldn't fight, something that knew my fear better than I did. In the following months, I developed strange habits. I could no longer stay home alone. When my mother needed to go out, I begged to go with her, no matter where. Church, market, friends' houses, anywhere was better than that empty apartment. At night, I slept with all the lights on. My mother complained about the electric bill, but eventually gave up arguing. She saw the terror in my eyes every time someone mentioned turning off the lights. I stopped taking long showers. I would get in and out in less than 5 minutes, always with the door unlocked, always alert to any strange sound. I, who had always been quiet, became even more withdrawn. I avoided talking about home. I avoided talking about what I saw, what I felt, because deep down I was afraid that talking about it would make it more real, stronger. There were nights when I woke up sweating, heart racing, certain that there was something in the room with me. I would lie still in bed, eyes wide in the dark, waiting to see that black figure materialize again. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. And the worst part was not knowing which of the two options was more frightening. I wanted to believe it was all imagination. I desperately wanted to believe it, and the evidence showed the opposite. But when I went back home and saw that dark hallway, all thoughts of ignoring it became weak. Over time, the trauma turned into something different. It was no longer just fear. It was a constant awareness, a permanent vigilance. I learned to read the signs, the change in the air, the silence that was different from normal silence, the sensation of being watched. I learned not to be alone when those signs appeared. But I also learned something darker. I learned that some things cannot be explained, cannot be fought, cannot be avoided. They can only be survived. When I finally started to understand what it all was, things became a little easier to handle. But the scars remained. To this day, as an adult, I can't sleep in total darkness. I always leave a light on somewhere, a lamp, a hallway light, anything. To this day, when I'm home alone during a storm, I feel that tightness in my chest, that visceral memory of being trapped in the dark with something that shouldn't exist. To this day, when I see a dark hallway with open doors on either side, my entire body shivers because I know what might be waiting there. Some people say children have fertile imaginations, that they make things up, that they confuse dreams with reality. And maybe they're right. But I was awake that night, completely awake. And what happened wasn't imagination. It was real. As real as the fear I still carry. As real as the nights when I wake up sweating, 10 years old again, wrapped in a damp towel, waiting for someone to knock on the door and save me. That night taught me that terror doesn't need claws or fangs. It doesn't need blood or violence. It only needs darkness, loneliness, and time. And a 10-year-old child who hasn't yet learned that some doors should never be opened, that some hallways should never be crossed, and that some presences once noticed never leave you completely in peace. This was my story, one among many others I lived through during my childhood, but this one in particular never left me. It's etched in my memory with disturbing clarity, as if it happened yesterday. Every detail, every sensation, every second of that night. I shared this with you not to seek answers, not to try to convince anyone of anything, but because I know I'm not alone. I know there are other people out there who have lived similar experiences, who have seen things that shouldn't exist, who have felt presences that logic can't explain. And to those people I say, you are not crazy. I know it wasn't easy. I know that maybe some of you are looking into the dark corners of the room right now, wondering if there's something there. And maybe there is, or maybe not. The question is, do you have the courage to find out? If this story impacted you in any way, if it made you feel something, leave a like. It helps me keep sharing these experiences with you. And if you have a similar story, if you've lived something you can't explain, leave it in the comments. I read them all. And who knows, maybe your story will be the next one I tell here. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next accounts. Because believe me, this was just one of the many experiences I've had, and some are even more disturbing. Turn on the notification bell, because you won't want to miss what's coming. See you next time, if there is a next time for all of us. Because sometimes after hearing certain stories, after opening certain doors in the mind, things start to happen, and you might become the next story. Good luck, and don't forget to leave a light on tonight.